The galaxy had been ruled by the hegemony of allied species for 12,000 years before humanity ever left their home planet. 17 powerful alien civilizations had joined together to control trade, military power, and the laws that governed thousands of worlds. They had conquered, traded, and expanded across the stars, while humans were still learning to build simple machines on their small blue world. When the first human starship finally crossed into hegemony space, it was not a mighty warship or a grand exploration vessel. It was a converted cargo hauler called the Wandering Star, held together by desperate engineering and the stubborn hope of its crew. Captain Richard Holloway had spent 15 years building that ship from salvaged parts and borrowed technology. He had dreamed of the stars since childhood, and now, at 53 years old, he was finally among them. The hegemony patrol vessel that intercepted them was 300 times larger than the Wandering Star. Its hull was covered in weapons that could have destroyed a small moon. Commander Zethrix of the Vectari Imperial Fleet looked at the tiny human vessel on his display screen and felt nothing but mild curiosity. The Vectari were insectoid beings, standing nearly 3 meters tall with armored bodies and compound eyes that could see in spectrums humans could not imagine. They had ruled the hegemony for 6,000 years. They viewed other species the way humans might view interesting insects. "What is this?" Zethrix asked his sensor officer. "Unknown species, Commander? Bipedal mammals from a system on the outer rim. They call themselves humans." Zethrix clicked his mandibles in what passed for a laugh among his kind. "Mammals. How quaint. Bring them aboard. The scientist may find them amusing." Captain Holloway and his crew of 12 were escorted onto the Vectari vessel with weapons pointed at their backs. They were taken to a holding area and examined like laboratory specimens. Blood samples were drawn. Measurements were taken. Questions were asked in broken translations. "Your species has only recently discovered faster-than-light travel," a Vectari scientist observed. "Primitive method. Inefficient engines. You are fortunate you did not destroy yourselves." Holloway kept his voice calm. "We are peaceful explorers. We wish only to make contact with other civilizations and establish friendly relations." The scientist's compound eyes showed no emotion. "Friendly relations require something of value to offer. What do humans have that the hegemony could possibly want?" Holloway had no answer. Humans had no advanced technology to trade. They had no rare resources that could not be found elsewhere. They had only their determination and their dreams. The Wandering Star was eventually released with coordinates to a space station where humans could apply for recognition as a minor species. The process, they were told, usually took several decades. In the meantime, humans were permitted to establish small colonies in unclaimed systems, provided they paid appropriate fees and followed hegemony regulations. Ambassador Linda Morrison arrived at Station Kareth 7, 3 years later, to begin the formal recognition process. She was a career diplomat, 45 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and patient eyes that had seen many negotiations. She understood that humanity was entering a game where the rules had been written by others, and she was prepared to play it carefully. The quarters assigned to her delegation were in the station's lower levels, near the waste processing plants and the housing blocks for servant species. The air was thick with strange smells and the lighting flickered constantly. When Morrison requested better accommodations, her request was marked as received and never answered. She spent her first year simply trying to get meetings with minor officials. The Vectari administrators were always too busy. The Kelmori trade representatives had no interest in species that could not afford their services. The Thracian military attaches looked at human soldiers and laughed openly at their small size and soft bodies. "They are not cruel by intention," Morrison wrote in her reports to Earth. "They simply do not see us as worthy of attention. To them, we are background noise, barely more significant than the cleaning drones that sweep their corridors." But Morrison was not discouraged. She used her time to observe. She learned the political relationships between hegemony species. She mapped the power structures and identified the pressure points. She made friends among the servant species, the small civilizations that had been absorbed into the hegemony and reduced to labor roles. They were eager to talk to someone who treated them with respect. The hegemony is not as unified as it appears, she reported after 5 years. There are rivalries, resentments, and hidden conflicts. The Thracians hate the Vectari, but fear them too much to rebel. The Kelmori care only for profit and would abandon any alliance that threatened their wealth. There are cracks in this empire. We simply need to be patient. On Earth, her reports were studied carefully. The United Human Coalition, formed specifically to manage humanity's expansion into space, understood that they were entering a dangerous universe. They had hoped for friendship among the stars. Instead, they found contempt. President Maria Vasquez read Morrison's assessments and made a decision that would shape human history. She called together the leaders of every major nation and presented them with a simple choice: unite completely or be destroyed separately. The aliens do not take us seriously, she told them. They see us as primitives, as potential slaves, as resources to be exploited when convenient. We cannot change their minds through diplomacy alone. We must become strong enough that they cannot ignore us. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, the species truly united. National militaries merged into a single human defense force. Scientific research was coordinated across all nations. Resources were pooled for projects that no single country could have attempted alone. The work was done quietly. Human colonies were established in systems the hegemony considered worthless. Mining operations extracted resources from asteroids that alien surveys had overlooked. Research facilities were built in hidden locations, staffed by the brightest minds humanity could produce. Captain Samuel Burke of the reconnaissance vessel Quiet Dawn spent 6 years mapping hegemony space. He traveled as a simple trader, buying and selling minor goods at stations across the galaxy. No one paid attention to the unremarkable human in his small ship. No one noticed the sophisticated sensors hidden behind his cargo holds. Burke cataloged fleet movements, recorded weapon signatures, and analyzed alien technology from safe distances. He identified weaknesses in hegemony defenses that the aliens themselves had forgotten. He mapped supply routes, communication networks, and the locations of military shipyards. They have grown complacent, Burke noted in his final report before returning to Earth. They have not faced a serious military threat in 3,000 years. Their weapons are powerful, but outdated. Their tactics are predictable. Their officers are chosen for political connections rather than ability. If war ever comes, they will not be ready for an enemy that has studied them carefully. On Earth, the information was analyzed by military strategists who had spent their careers preparing for conflicts they hoped would never come. They designed new weapons based on principles the hegemony had never explored. They developed tactics that exploited alien weaknesses. They trained soldiers in academies hidden beneath mountains and oceans. 30 years passed. Ambassador Morrison remained at her post, patient and watchful. Human colonies grew slowly, paying their fees and following every regulation. Human traders operated at the margins of hegemony commerce. Always polite, never threatening, the galaxy continued to ignore the quiet humans. The Vectari built new palaces. The Thracians fought their endless wars against minor species. The Kelmori counted their profits. None of them noticed the preparations happening in the shadows. None of them understood that. Humanity was not waiting to be accepted. They were waiting for the right moment to show the galaxy what they had become. The colony of harvest. Moon had existed for 22 years in a system that no one else wanted. The planet orbited a dying star, and its only value came from the mineral-rich asteroids that filled the outer reaches of the system. 12,000 humans lived there, mostly miners and farmers who had come seeking a simple life away from the crowded worlds of the inner colonies. Governor Trisha Dunn had led Harvest Moon for 8 years. She was 61 years old, a former engineer who had helped design the colony's life support systems. She knew every corridor, every family, every child born on her world. When her sensors detected the approaching fleet, she felt her heart turn cold. How many ships? She asked her communications officer. 47 capital vessels. Over 200 support craft. They are broadcasting Thracian military codes. Dunn closed her eyes for a moment. The Thracians were warriors, a reptilian species that had built their civilization on conquest and violence. They respected nothing except strength, and humanity had never shown them any. Send a message to their commander. Tell them we are a peaceful civilian settlement. Ask them to state their intentions. The response came within minutes. Commander Krethvoss appeared on her screen, his scaled face twisted into what might have been amusement. His eyes were yellow and cold, like a predator studying its prey. "Human colony," he said. "I am claiming this system and its resources for the Thrasian Third Fleet. You will surrender all mining equipment, food stores, and able-bodied workers. Resistance will result in the destruction of your settlement." Dunn kept her voice steady. "We are civilians under hegemony protection. This action violates 17 different treaties." Krethvoss laughed, a harsh sound that came through the speakers like grinding metal. "The hegemony cares nothing for humans. No one will come to save you. No one will even notice you are gone. You have 1 hour to begin compliance." The transmission ended. Dunn sat in silence for a long moment, then turned to her staff. "Begin evacuation to the deep shelters. All civilians underground in 45 minutes. And get me a secure channel to Earth." The hidden communication relay that humanity had installed in every colony was buried beneath 3 kilometers of rock, invisible to Thrasian sensors. It used quantum entanglement technology that the hegemony had never developed, allowing instant communication across any distance. Admiral Nathan. Cole received the message at Lunar Command 4 hours later. He was a quiet man who had spent his entire career preparing for a moment he hoped would never arrive. He read Governor Dunn's report twice, his weathered face showing no emotion. "The Thrasians have begun orbital bombardment," his aide reported. "The colony's surface structures are being systematically destroyed. Casualties are estimated in the hundreds." Cole nodded slowly. "How many civilians reached the shelters?" "Approximately 11,000. They can survive underground for several months, but if the Thrasians send ground forces, they will be helpless." Cole turned to the display screen showing the position of human military assets. For 30 years, the Human Defense Force had trained and prepared in secret. Now the time had come to reveal what they had built. "Contact the 7th Response Group," he ordered. "Tell Captain Daniel Perry to proceed to Harvest Moon at maximum speed. Rules of engagement are as follows. No Thrasian vessel leaves that system." His aide hesitated. "Sir, the 7th Group has only 12 vessels. The Thrasian Third Fleet has over 200. Cole looked at him with calm eyes. "I know exactly what the 7th Group has. Send the order." Captain Daniel Perry received his instructions aboard the human vessel Silent Thunder. He was 34 years old, with dark hair and steady hands that had never trembled in combat simulations. He had trained for this mission since the age of 18, knowing that someday humanity would need warriors willing to face impossible odds. His crew of 7 had trained alongside him. They knew their ship better than they knew their own families. They understood the weapons they carried and the technology that made them possible. They were not afraid. "All ships, this is Silent Thunder," Perry announced over the fleet channel. "We jump in 3 minutes. When we arrive, maintain formation Omega-7 until my command. Then we show these creatures what humans can do." The 12 vessels of the 7th Response Group entered fold space together. The technology was humanity's own invention, developed in secret over 2 decades. It allowed travel faster than anything the hegemony had achieved, bending space itself to cross vast distances in moments. They emerged at the edge of the Harvest Moon System 18, hours after leaving Earth. There. Arrival was detected immediately, Commander. Krethvoss watched the new contacts appear on his tactical display with mild interest. 12 vessels, he observed. The humans have sent a token force to die alongside their colonists. How touching. Commander, his sensor officer said slowly, these ships do not match any known human configurations. Their power signatures are ... unusual. Unusual how? I cannot determine their weapons capability. The readings make no sense. Krethvoss dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. Human technology is primitive. Whatever tricks they have developed will not save them. All ships, intercept and destroy the enemy formation. The Thracian fleet moved to engage, their massive warships accelerating toward the tiny human vessels. Krethvos had fought dozens of battles against species far more advanced than humans. He expected this engagement to last perhaps 10 minutes. He was wrong, Captain. Captain Perry watched the approaching enemy fleet on his display. The Thracian ships were impressive, covered in weapons and armor that would have terrified any other species in the galaxy. But Perry saw something else when he looked at them. He saw targets, all ships weapons-free, he said calmly. Execute pattern Omega-7. Make it count. The human vessels accelerated at rates that should have killed their crews. Inertial dampeners, another human innovation, protected them from forces that would have crushed Thracian warriors into paste. They moved through the enemy formation like shadows, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. And then they began firing. The weapons that humanity had developed in secret operated on principles the hegemony had never discovered. Gravitational pulse cannons created microscopic singularities inside enemy vessels, crushing them from within. Quantum disruptors reduced electronic systems to molten slag. Phase missiles passed through shields as if they did not exist, detonating inside reactor cores and ammunition magazines. Krethvos watched his fleet die. Ships that had survived 100 battles were being torn apart by vessels 1/10 their size. His warriors fired back desperately, but the human ships were too fast, too maneuverable, too impossible to hit. "What are they?" he screamed. "What weapons are they using?" No one could answer him. The tactical display showed red icons winking out one after another, each representing thousands of Thracian lives. His flagship shuddered as something struck its hull, tearing through armor that was supposed to be impenetrable.
"All ships,
"Retreat," Krethvos ordered. "Fall back to the jump point." But the humans did not let them run. The 12 vessels split into hunting pairs, pursuing the fleeing Thracians with relentless efficiency. Every ship that tried to escape was caught and destroyed. Every warrior who thought they could reach safety found only death. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, the Thracian Third Fleet had ceased to exist. 47 capital ships and 187 support craft had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and frozen bodies. Human losses, 0 vessels destroyed. Minor damage to 2 ships. Captain Perry surveyed the wreckage, his face showing no satisfaction. War was not something to celebrate, even when necessary. "Signal Harvest Moon," he ordered. "Tell them help has arrived. Then contact Lunar Command and let them know the mission is complete." On the surface below, Governor Dunn received the message in her underground shelter. She read it 3 times before she could believe it. Around her, 11,000 colonists waited in silence, their faces illuminated by emergency lighting. "It is over," she announced, her voice breaking. "The fleet has been destroyed. We are safe." The cheering echoed through the tunnels for hours, but across the galaxy, the real consequences were only beginning. The destruction of the Third Fleet would send shockwaves through every species in the hegemony. For the first time in thousands of years, someone had challenged the established order, and the quiet humans had shown that they were no more. News traveled fast across the hegemony. Within hours of the battle at Harvest Moon, every major species knew that something impossible had happened. The Thracian Third Fleet, one of the most powerful military formations in the galaxy, had been completely destroyed by 12 human vessels. The initial reaction was disbelief. Thracian officials claimed the reports were exaggerated. Bactari intelligence analysts insisted there must be some mistake in the data. The Kelmori, ever practical, simply waited to see what would happen next. High Coordinator Zethrix of the Bactari Imperial Council received the full battle recordings 3 days after the engagement. He watched them alone in his private chambers, his compound eyes taking in every detail of the human attack. When the recording ended, he sat in silence for a very long time. The humans had achieved something that should have been impossible. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their tactics more sophisticated than anything the hegemony had faced in 3,000 years. Every assumption about human capability had been wrong. Summon the council, Zethryx ordered his aide, and bring the human ambassador to the chamber. It is time we spoke directly. Ambassador Linda Morrison received the summons with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. For 30 years she had waited for this moment, the moment when the hegemony would finally be forced to acknowledge humanity. But she also knew that wounded pride could be more dangerous than open hostility. She dressed carefully in formal diplomatic attire and walked to the council chamber, accompanied by only 2 aides. The corridors that had once been closed to her now parted like water before her passage. Aliens who had ignored her for decades now watched her with expressions she had never seen before on their faces. Fear. The council chamber was vast, designed to intimidate visitors with its scale and the elevated positions of the 17 species representatives. Morrison had stood in this room many times before, always looking up at those who considered themselves her betters. Today felt different. High Coordinator Zethryx spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of 6,000 years of Vectari authority. Ambassador Morrison, your species has committed an act of war against a member of the hegemony. The destruction of the Thrasian Third Fleet demands explanation. Morrison kept her voice calm and measured. The Thrasian Third Fleet attacked a civilian human colony without provocation. They demanded the surrender of our citizens as slave labor. They began orbital bombardment of civilian structures. We responded to protect our people. You destroyed an entire battle fleet. The Thracian ambassador, Grethmore, rose from his seat, his scaled body trembling with rage. Thousands of warriors dead. Ships that took decades to build gone in minutes. This was not defense. This was massacre. Your fleet attacked unarmed civilians, Morrison replied. Your commander offered them 1 hour to surrender before beginning the killing. What would you have done in our position? We would have accepted our place in the natural order, Grethmore snarled. Weak species serve the strong. This is how the galaxy has always worked. Perhaps it is time for that to change. The chamber fell silent. Morrison looked around at the assembled representatives, meeting each of their gazes in turn. For the first time, she did not look away. For 30 years, humanity has tried to find its place in your hegemony, she continued. We asked for fair treatment, and were denied. We requested trade agreements, and were ignored. We applied for recognition as a sovereign species and were told to wait. You looked at us and saw only weakness. You assumed that because we were small and quiet, we had nothing to offer and nothing to fear. She activated a holographic display from her personal device. The chamber filled with images that made several species gasp audibly. While you ignored us, we were watching you. We studied your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. We built research facilities in places you never thought to look. We developed weapons based on scientific principles you have not yet discovered. We trained soldiers and built ships and prepared for the day when your contempt would turn to aggression. The display showed human shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, their production capacity dwarfing anything the hegemony had suspected. It showed weapons tests conducted in remote systems, demonstrating destructive power that shocked even the veteran warriors among the delegates. It showed military academies and training facilities producing soldiers by the millions. How is this possible? Zethryx demanded. We have monitored human space for decades. We detected none of this. You saw what you expected to see, Morrison replied. Primitive ships, struggling colonies. A species barely capable of interstellar travel. You never imagined that we might be hiding our true capabilities. The Kelmori representative, a serpentine being named Shirok, spoke for the first time. What do you want, human? If you had the power to destroy us, you would have attacked already. The fact that we are having this conversation means you want something from us. Morrison smiled. The Kelmori were greedy and immoral, but they were also practical. They would be the first to understand the situation. We want what we have always wanted, she said. Peace. Fair trade. Recognition as equals. We did not build our military to conquer the galaxy. We built it because we knew that someday someone would try to take what was ours. The Thracians proved us right. And if we refuse? Zethryx asked. If the hegemony decides that humanity is too dangerous to tolerate, then you will learn what we are truly capable of. The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Every representative in the chamber understood the threat behind them. Humanity had destroyed a battle fleet of over 200 ships without losing a single vessel. What could they do against the combined might of the hegemony? The answer was terrifying to contemplate. Grethmore was not finished. The Thrasian Empire will not accept this humiliation. We will gather our full strength and burn your worlds to ash. Your technology may have surprised us once, but we will adapt. We will find counters to your weapons, and then we will show you the true meaning of war. Morrison turned to face him directly. Commander Krethvoss said something similar before he attacked Harvest Moon. He believed that humans were weak, that our colony would be easy prey, that no one would care if we were destroyed. He was wrong about all of those things. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Third Fleet had 247 vessels. We destroyed them all with 12 ships in 11 minutes. Our losses were 0. Do you truly believe that gathering more ships will change the outcome? Do you think we have shown you the limits of our capability? The chamber was silent. Even Grethmore had no response. High Coordinator Zethric studied the human ambassador for a long moment. In 6,000 years of leadership, his people had never faced a situation quite like this. The Vectari had always been the strongest species in the hegemony. They had always set the rules. Now a species they had dismissed as insignificant was dictating terms to them. What guarantee do we have that humanity will honor any agreement? He asked finally. You have proven that you are capable of deception on a massive scale. How can we trust anything you say? You cannot, Morrison admitted. Just as we cannot trust you. The hegemony has broken promises to countless species over the millennia. You have conquered, enslaved, and exploited those weaker than yourselves without hesitation. Trust is earned through actions, not words. She deactivated her display. But I will tell you this. Humanity did not want war. We built our military because we had no choice. Every ship we constructed, every weapon we developed, every soldier we trained was done in hope that we would never need them. We would have preferred to be your partners, not your enemies. Zethric asked. Now we will see if the hegemony is capable of learning from its mistakes. Leave our colonies alone. Treat our merchants fairly. Acknowledge our right to exist as equals. Do these things, and there will be no conflict between us. Morrison gathered her aides and turned toward the chamber exit. At the door, she paused and looked back at the assembled representatives. You have ignored humanity for 30 years. You have 1 month to give us your answer. Choose wisely. She left the chamber, and the doors closed behind her. The 17 species of the hegemony looked at each other in stunned silence. The quiet humans had spoken. Now the galaxy would have to decide how to respond. The Hegemony Council debated for 17 days before reaching a decision. High Coordinator Zethric argued for negotiation, pointing out that war with humanity would be costly even if they ultimately prevailed. The Kelmori supported him, calculating that trade with humans would be more profitable than conquest. But the Thracians demanded vengeance. Their voice carried the weight of military tradition stretching back thousands of years. In the end, pride won over wisdom. Grand Admiral Vectrix, Prime, was given command of the largest military force assembled in hegemony history. Every species contributed vessels. The Vectari sent their legendary swarm fleets, thousands of fighters operating in perfect coordination. The Thracians contributed their remaining battle groups, hungry for revenge. The Kelmori funded the operation, providing supplies and logistics support that cost more than the annual budgets of most civilizations. The combined fleet gathered in the Kethros system, a staging area chosen for its distance from human space. Over 10,000 capital ships filled the void, crewed by billions of warriors from 17 species. Support craft numbered in the tens of thousands. It was a force that could have conquered any known civilization in the galaxy. Vectrix, Prime, addressed her commanders from the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion. She was the most decorated military leader in Vectari history, with a career spanning for centuries of warfare. Her compound eyes showed no doubt as she outlined the battle plan. The humans have demonstrated unexpected capabilities, she acknowledged. But they have also shown us their weaknesses. They rely on speed and surprise. They cannot match us in direct confrontation. Our strategy will deny them both advantages. The plan was straightforward. The combined fleet would advance toward human space in 3 massive waves. Each wave would be supported by extensive sensor networks designed to detect the unusual signatures of human vessels. If the humans tried to repeat their hit-and-run tactics, they would be anticipated and countered. We outnumber them by a factor we cannot even calculate, Vectrix Prime continued. Even if their weapons are superior, they cannot fight everywhere at once. We will overwhelm them with numbers. We will burn their colonies one by one until they surrender. The fleet moved out of the Kethro system and began its advance toward human space. They made no attempt to hide their approach. Vectrix Prime wanted humanity to know what was coming. She wanted them to understand that their defiance would be punished with complete destruction. Admiral Nathan Cole received intelligence reports on the enemy advance from monitoring stations scattered across the outer systems. He studied the data carefully, noting the size of the approaching force and the formation they had chosen. They are being cautious, he observed to his staff at Lunar Command. They have learned from Harvest Moon. They will not be caught off guard again. His aide, Commander Lisa Grant, pulled up projections on the tactic. AL display. Our current defense force number is 240 vessels. Even with our technological advantage, we cannot engage 10,000 ships in open combat. We are not going to, Cole replied. The hegemony expects us to fight the way they do, meeting strength with strength. They are wrong. He outlined the human defense strategy. Rather than concentrating their forces, the human defense force would spread out across multiple systems. They would use their superior speed and stealth to strike at the enemy from unexpected angles. They would target supply ships, communication relays, and command vessels. They would make the combined fleet bleed for every light year of their advance. This will be a different kind of war, Cole explained. We cannot win through a single decisive battle. We will win by making the cost of victory too high for them to pay. The first engagement occurred 3 weeks into the hegemony advance. A human squadron of 15 vessels appeared without warning. Behind the second wave of the combined fleet, they destroyed 47 supply ships and a command cruiser in 6 minutes before disappearing into fold. Space Vectrix Prime was furious. How did they get behind us? Our sensors should have detected them. Her officers had no explanation. The human fold space technology operated differently from anything the hegemony understood. Their ships could appear and disappear at will, striking from directions that should have been impossible. The attacks continued. Every few days, human squadrons would emerge from nowhere, destroy high-value targets, and vanish before the fleet could respond. Vectrix Prime redeployed her forces repeatedly, trying to protect vulnerable elements, but the humans always found gaps in her defenses. Losses mounted. 200 ships in the first month, 400 in the second. The combined fleet had barely entered human space, and they had already lost more vessels than most species possessed. This is madness, Sirach of the Kelmori reported to the High Council. We are spending resources at an unsustainable rate. The humans are bleeding us dry without ever committing to a major engagement.
Oh.
But the Thracians refused to withdraw. Grethmore argued that any sign of weakness would encourage humanity to press their advantage. The war continued. Admiral Cole watched the enemy advance slow and then stop as their supply lines became too stretched to maintain. The combined fleet established defensive positions in 3 systems at the edge of human space, unable to advance further without risking complete logistical collapse. Now we give them what they want, Cole announced. A battle they can see. The human defense force gathered at the Meridian system. Directly in the path of the combined fleet, 240 vessels formed a defensive line across the approach to Earth. It was a tiny force compared to the thousands of enemy ships, but it was positioned exactly where the hegemony wanted to fight. Vectrix Prime saw the human formation and felt confidence for the first time in months. They have finally made a mistake, she declared. They cannot hide behind speed and deception here. This will be a battle of attrition, and we have far more to spend, she ordered the full advance. 10,000 ships moved toward the human line, weapons charging. Warriors eager for the confrontation they had been denied, Commander Lisa Grant commanded the human center from her vessel. Defiant stand. She was 41 years old, a former physicist who had helped design the weapons her fleet now carried. She watched the approaching enemy without fear. "All ships hold position until my command," she ordered. "Let them come to us." The combined fleet entered weapons range and opened fire. Thousands of beams, missiles, and projectiles streaked toward the human line. It was a display of firepower that should have obliterated anything in its path. The human vessels activated their defensive systems. Energy shields of unprecedented power deflected beam weapons. Point defense grids destroyed incoming missiles. Space itself seemed to bend around the human ships, causing enemy fire to pass harmlessly by. "What is happening?" Vectrix Prime demanded. "Why is nothing hitting them?" Before anyone could answer, the humans began their counterattack. Lisa Grant spoke calmly into her command channel. "All ships execute Cascade Protocol. Show them what 200 humans can do." The weapons humanity had developed in secret were now fully revealed. Gravitational cannons tore through enemy formations, crushing multiple vessels with single shots. Quantum disruptors spread through the hegemony fleet like a virus, shutting down electronics and leaving ships helpless. Phase missiles appeared inside enemy vessels without warning, detonating in reactor cores and ammunition magazines. The combined fleet died in waves. Hundreds of ships in the first hour, thousands in the second. Vectrix Prime watched her tactical display fill with red indicators as the largest military force in hegemony history was systematically destroyed. "This cannot be happening," she whispered. "We have 10,000 ships. How can 200 defeat us?" She ordered retreat, but it was too late. The human vessels pursued, moving faster than anything the hegemony could match. They targeted command ships and communication relays, leaving the enemy fleet unable to coordinate. They destroyed transport vessels, stranding warriors far from home. They showed no mercy, because none had been offered to the colonists of Harvest Moon. The battle lasted 72 hours. When it ended, the combined fleet had been reduced from 10,000 vessels to fewer than 3,000 survivors. Human losses: 47 ships destroyed. Crews largely recovered. Vectrix Prime fled with the remnants, her flagship crippled and her reputation destroyed. She transmitted a single message to the High Council before entering fold space. They were never weak. They were waiting, and we gave them exactly what they needed to prove it. The hegemony had sent everything they had. Humanity had broken them completely. The Hegemony Council met in emergency session for the first time in 2,000 years. The Grand Chamber, normally filled with confident posturing and political maneuvering, was silent. Representatives who had laughed at humanity 3 decades ago now struggled to comprehend the scale of their defeat. High Coordinator, Sthethrix had aged visibly in the weeks since the battle. His species lived for centuries, but the weight of what had happened seemed to press down on him like millennia of failure. He stood before the assembled delegates and spoke words that no Vectari leader had ever spoken before. "The combined fleet has been destroyed. 7,000 capital ships lost. Billions of warriors dead. Our military capability has been reduced to a fraction of what it was before this war began." The chamber remained silent. No one challenged him. No one offered excuses or alternative interpretations. The facts were too overwhelming to deny. "We have no choice but to accept human terms," Sthethrix continued. "Our economies cannot sustain another mobilization. Our populations will not support continued war against an enemy we cannot defeat. The hegemony must seek peace." Grethmore of the Thracians rose slowly from his seat. The warrior ambassador who had demanded vengeance now looked like a broken creature, his scales dull and his posture slumped. "The Thracian Empire will accept this outcome," he said, each word seeming to cause him physical pain. "We have lost too many warriors. Our fleet is shattered. Our honor is destroyed. But we will not be the species that brings final ruin upon the hegemony through stubborn pride." One by one, the other species voiced their agreement. The Kelmori, ever practical, had already begun calculating how to profit from the new order. The smaller species, those who had been absorbed into the hegemony as servants and laborers, watched with expressions that ranged from hope to disbelief. "Send word to the humans," Zethryx ordered. "Tell them we are prepared to negotiate." Ambassador Linda Morrison received the message at Station Kareth 7, where she had remained throughout the war. She had refused evacuation, trusting that humanity would prevail, that her presence would be needed when the fighting ended. She was not alone when she returned to the council chamber. Admiral Nathan Cole walked beside her, along with a full diplomatic delegation. Human military vessels held position around the station, their presence a reminder of what had happened to the last fleet that challenged humanity. The chamber had been reconfigured. A platform now rose to the same level. As the species representatives, and it was on this platform that the human delegation took their place. For the first time, they did not look up at the aliens who had once dismissed them. "The terms of peace are simple," Morrison announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "First, all hegemony military forces will withdraw to their home systems. Second, human colonies and trade routes will be recognized as sovereign territory under our protection. Third, all economic agreements will be renegotiated on equal terms." She paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives who had ignored humanity for so long. "Fourth, the classification of species as inferior, servant, or labor stock will be abolished immediately. Every civilization in the galaxy, regardless of size or power, will be treated with basic dignity and respect." Murmurs spread through the chamber. This was more than simple terms of surrender. Humanity was demanding fundamental changes to the structure of galactic civilization. "You ask us to abandon the principles our society was built upon," Zethryx observed. "The strong have always ruled the weak. This is the natural order of things." Admiral Cole spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it silenced every other sound in the chamber. "For 30 years, we watched how you treated those you considered beneath you. We saw species enslaved for their labor. We saw civilizations stripped of their culture and identity. We saw children born into servitude who would never know freedom." He stepped forward, and despite his unremarkable human appearance, every eye in the chamber was fixed upon him. "We did not build our military to conquer the galaxy. We built it because we believed that if we ever had the power to change things, we had the responsibility to try. You ignored us because we were quiet. You dismissed us because we were small. Now we are asking you to build something better." "And if we refuse?" Zethryx asked, though his voice carried no defiance. Cole's expression remained calm. "Then humanity will continue to defend those who cannot defend themselves. We have the power to destroy the hegemony completely. We have chosen not to use it. That choice remains ours to make." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for hours. Finally, High Coordinator Zethryx bowed his head in a gesture that no Vectari leader had ever made to another species. "The Vectari accept your terms." The other species followed, one by one. Even Grethmore, his pride broken, agreed to the conditions. The treaty was drafted over 3 days of negotiations. Covering every aspect of the new galactic order, it was signed in the same chamber, where humanity had once begged for basic recognition. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Human traders established fair partnerships with species that had once been exploited. Human scientists shared technology with civilizations that had been denied advancement for millennia. Human diplomats worked tirelessly to ensure that the principles of the treaty were upheld. The former servant species, freed from generations of oppression, became humanity's closest allies. They had seen how the quiet humans treated the powerless. They never forgot that kindness. Admiral Cole retired to a small farm on Earth, where he spent his remaining years in peace. He wrote letters to the families of every crew member who had died defending humanity, personally thanking them for their sacrifice. He never sought recognition or glory, believing that he had simply done what any decent person would do when given the power to make a difference. Ambassador Morrison became the first human to hold a permanent seat on the newly formed Galactic Assembly. The old council structure was abolished, replaced by a body where every species had an equal voice. She worked until her final day to ensure that no civilization would ever be ignored or dismissed as humanity once was. Captain Daniel Perry, the young officer who had led the first strike at Harvest Moon, rose to become the commander of the Human Defense Force. He never forgot the lessons of that first battle, training new generations of soldiers to be both warriors and protectors. Under his leadership, human military forces became known not for conquest, but for defending those who could not defend themselves. The hegemony faded into history, replaced by something that would have seemed impossible just decades before: a true community of equals. Disputes were settled through negotiation rather than force. Resources were shared rather than hoarded. Species that had been enemies for millennia learned to cooperate. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some of the old powers resented losing their dominance. Some species struggled to adapt to a galaxy where strength alone no longer guaranteed authority. There were challenges and setbacks and moments when the new order seemed ready to collapse, but humanity remained committed to the principles they had fought for. They had been ignored once. They had been dismissed. They had been treated as nothing more than primitive creatures unworthy of notice. They had responded by becoming the conscience of a galaxy. Centuries later, historians would study the remarkable transformation that occurred when humanity emerged onto the galactic stage. They would debate the causes and consequences, the decisions made and the paths not taken. But one lesson was never forgotten. Taught to every child of every species on every world in the galaxy: never underestimate the quiet ones. They may be watching. They may be learning. They may be preparing for the moment when they finally choose to act. And when that moment comes, everything changes.